Hi guys, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. Today I'm going to be doing a pretty short December wrap up because I only read 3 books during the month of December, but I do also have a pretty exciting announcement at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. The first book that I read in the month of December was Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder, and this is the first book in a fantasy series called The Chronicles of Ixia, basically set in a world where magic has been outlawed. And we follow our protagonist Yelena, who has been imprisoned for murder, and at the very beginning of the book she is basically given the option to either be executed for her crime or to become the king's food tester, and from there follows a whole different series of events. There is magic, there is political intrigue, there is a romance, although that kind of sat on the back burner and I thought was done particularly well. If you saw my review last month of The Glass Spare, this book basically did what that book needed to do, which was have a romance but don't veil a romance story as a fantasy story and then it really just be a romance story. But anyway, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought that the writing, it wasn't particularly complex, it was very accessible, it was very easy to read. I flew through it. It was not perfect, there were a couple of problems. I thought that there were a couple of plot holes within the overall story, but perhaps they will be resolved in later books. I don't know, I just thought that it was a really quick, enjoyable fantasy read. It wasn't too hard hitting, the world was created particularly well and very deftly, and yeah, I just thought that it was a very good book. The next book that I read in December was The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North, and by comparison to Poison Study, this was a much more complex storyline. It's basically about our protagonist Harry August, who is a non-linear person, which means that he basically gets to live his life over and over and over again. So when he dies, he goes back to the beginning, he's reborn, and he lives his whole life again. And there is a collective of people who are like this, and their job is to not disturb major events too much. And it's kind of an exploration of quantum physics and this idea of how the smallest decisions that we make can alter the entire course of our lives. It's an interesting look at how we would choose to do things differently if we were given the option of living our lives again and again, kind of a Groundhoggy Day type feel to it. It was not particularly quick moving. I don't feel like the story really got going until about 250 pages, and then all of a sudden it just really picks up. But until that point you're kind of wading through the decisions that Harry makes and the discovery that he makes of how his life is and how he comes to terms with the fact that he is this non-linear person. And I kind of felt like up until page 250 it was very slow and there wasn't much to draw me into the story, and I really only persevered with it because it was a book that was recommended to me by a friend. But once you hit that 250 pages, I'm sure it was, mark, the story just takes off on its own and it really flies, and I really enjoyed the latter half of the book. And again, it's a very interesting exploration of how you might choose to do things again were you given the option to do so, whilst also there is an interesting thread of love and friendship that kind of flows through the various different lives of Harry August as well. And I'm not gonna lie, the time travel and the quantum physics, like I said about dark matter, it did kind of bamboozle me a little bit, but if you can kind of put that to one side, then it is a pretty interesting story once you get past the very slow beginning. So if you can stick with it, then I think that it is well worth reading, but you go into it being aware that not much happens for the first half of the book, and once you get past that point then the story really takes off. And then the final book that I read in December was a whole roller coaster of emotions for me, and that was A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. And I know that this is pronounced a number of different ways, but I looked it up and apparently the Swedish say Uve, so that's what I'm going to say. I might be completely wrong, I might be pronouncing it completely wrong, but that is what we are going to go for. Sorry, my bookmark is dangling out of the front there. So this is a story of a very grumpy man called Ove, who is basically on a mission to kill himself following the death of his wife, and you know that from pretty much the beginning of the story. He feels like his life has lost its purpose, he feels like his life has lost its sense of meaning since his wife died, and he basically just wants to go and join her, and he makes all these plans to kill himself, and the plans keep getting thwarted by nosy neighbours or people doing things inaccurately. And Ove is the kind of man who lives his life in a very regimented way. So he has his routine, he gets up at the same time every day, he does a little patrol of the area where they live, he makes sure everything is just so. He likes rules, and he likes people who stick to the rules, and he believes very strongly that there are people who do things right and there are people who don't do things right. But he finds himself kind of entangled in a series of events with people who just do things their own way, and he kind of has to adjust his expectations of how life should be and how people should behave. And I've heard some people say that they didn't really get into the book, and it is translated from the Swedish, and I read a book earlier in the year which was also translated, and I think that it has a very distinctive writing style. You can tell basically that it has been translated because some of the writing is a little bit stiff and formal, and some of the turns of phrase are not how we would actually say them in English. But I think once you get into the story, once you can try and see past that to actually what the story is telling you, then it is very, very enjoyable, and it is a whole roller coaster of emotions. I laughed, I sobbed, I giggled and talked about it, and just Ove is a very frustrating character in the way that he's so rigid, and you just feel for him so deeply about the loss of his wife, and it's so sad, and you just want everything to be better for him, but you don't really know if the best thing is that he continues to live, or the best thing is that he gets to go and be with his wife, whom he just adored so very, very much. And you kind of flip between two timelines. You go through the present day as Ove is going about his business, trying to kill himself and being thwarted, and you also follow Uve's history, so you get some background to what made him the way that he is as well, which I thought was very interesting. And yeah, I just really, really love this book. I can see why it's such a well-loved book. I can also see why people may dislike it. I did think the writing was stilted, and it is problematic. The author loves flowery descriptions, so it could never be that Ove would just frown at somebody. It would be that Ove would just frown at somebody and then go off into a big complex description, and that happened every time Ove had a reaction to anything, and that got a little bit frustrating. And there's also a funny obsession with cars and the fact that Ove can't trust anybody who drives anything but a Saab, and that was a bit overdone, kind of felt like the pudding had been over egged, as you might say. So yeah, the story was definitely problematic, but I just thought that the overall vibe that I got from this book, it was just really heartwarming and really moving, and if you haven't yet read it, then I would definitely recommend that you do. Okay, so they are the books that I read during the month of December. Do let me know what you read and what you are planning to read in January. And now, just very quickly, I wanted to make an announcement that I have started a book club on Facebook with two other very lovely ladies. We have called it Bookish Mamas, but if you are a bookish person who is looking for an online book club, then feel free to join in. I will leave the link to the group down below, and we will be announcing our new read on the 2nd, which I think may have already happened when I put this video up. So yeah, if you are interested in joining an online book club, then do feel free to come and join us over there. But for now, thank you very much. Don't forget to give me the thumbs up and subscribe if you aren't already, and I will see you all soon.